So at the moment, I'm racing in F1000. So I've been racing F1000 since I don't know, 2012 was the first year I went into it. I've kind of been in and out a little bit. I've not really done full seasons every year, but that's sort of where I am at the moment. In between that, I've done a little bit of F3 and a little bit of testing in a few other cars, but yeah, sort of stuck with the F1000 at the moment.
So, what's been your favourite part about driving in F1000 in your whole career?
Um, what in terms of like, are you thinking like results, or are you thinking in terms of like about the car itself?
The car itself, just driving the car.
I think it's just the fact that it's just like such a adrenaline buzz of a car. Like there's nothing really. And obviously, for the money you kind of the budget you're working on, it's like there's nothing else that like really compares to it. You might have my dog come in. Yeah. So in terms of like the car itself, it's just like the fact that it's just like there's nothing else really that touches it really. It's one of them cars that like you got like good aero balance, you've got like ridiculous amount of power to weight, but also it's quite a nice car to drive. It actually gives you like quite a lot of feedback. You never feel like you're sort of like driving it over the edge almost. Like you know where the limit of it is quite easily. Whereas I think on maybe some of the like the say like F3 and F4 cars, you might find that because you've got maybe got a little bit more aero, a bit more weight. I think you almost like on that edge, and like if you go past it, it like throws you off. Whereas with our cars, you can almost like come back from that.
So, you say that you like the adrenaline. Do you ever feel fear or when you're going so quick?
I feel fear. I mean, I suppose like there's no. I don't think like now I've been doing it for so long. I don't think there's like a fear. I think maybe when I first started, you had the maybe like a little bit of like nerves in terms of like you're on a grid, like especially when you first start, you come from karts and you go from like something that's quite small to something. I mean, the Jedi's aren't a massive car, but at the same time, just a lot bigger than a car, and you go a lot quicker and weigh a lot more. So I suppose maybe not like yeah, maybe more like nerves and fear. Maybe initially, I think now I'm sort of so used to it that like that kind of it's almost just become like a bit more of a norm. It's yeah, like now I think where we were going back to like sort of 2012, going into say like 2013, where you would have had like a 6 month break over the winter, and you're not going to the car, you got the pit lane, you put your foot down, and you're like, oh crap, I'm holding over dear life. There, it's like now you kind of jump in the car, drive on the pits, put your foot down, you're like, oh yes, the norm now. This.
So, is it in the youth karting leagues? Is that where you started your career racing?
Yeah, so I started well yeah, going right back. So I started in I doing a bit of indoor karting. So that was when I was probably 3, 4 years old. We had like a basically a full size pro kart cut down and cut and shut into into a car that would fit me. I had like big blocks of wood under the pedals and steering rack was cut down. The whole chassis was shortened. So I actually started out in probably what was quite a quick kart, I suppose, in a way, for like quite a small child, because it was like a full size pro kart, full engine, everything. But I weighed about, a kilo. So yeah, it was a quick little kart to sort of start, and then sort of from there, we sold that and obviously went into sort of doing more of like the outdoor karting. But I mean, we started testing really from being probably 6 years old in like a cadet kart. So that was like quite early, really. So we used to go to like places like Rower and places like that where we used to just go to on like the sort of like non-championship like test days on like weekends so that we could just go and get some like experience. Then kind of just sort of at the time kind of took the sort of normal path through really, which was like cadets like 8 till 12, like junior TKM up to sort of 16. Then from there and then rather than kind of go down the route of doing like the senior karting and like Rotax or CET we sort of did a little bit just for a couple of months as well. We were sort of deciding what to do. Then we went down the um, long circuit karting route. So then again, that was like a sort of different experience again from sort of, a single drive kart going up to something with like 6 gears and like again, quite a big difference in sort of speed all of a sudden.
So, I interviewed someone who was only 5 not long ago who races in the go kart leagues, and like seeing how the videos of how they race around at such a young age, No, I couldn't do that now if I tried. But how important is the like starting that young in developing your skills in being able to race that quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of like two ways to look at it, isn't there? I think you've got people like myself, maybe that started at a very young age, started, progressed through, drove like the fastest thing you can drive at that age, which again learns you a lot of like your car control, obviously like racecraft, things like that. But then I suppose you've got the other side that if you are starting late, you see a lot of people. I think you see some of the guys who are starting like in karts now. Some people don't come into it till like they're 11, 12 years old, and then they just absolutely like they're at every weekend. They no stop of them. Like they'll get to something like if they've got the budget to do it, they'll go to like Formula well, it's not Formula Renault now, like sort of like an F3 and F4 car, but they'll be like testing every weekend. So when you're getting that much seat time in such a short spell, also that builds a lot of that as well. So yeah, I mean, there's two sides to it, really. I mean, I progressed through obviously from like gaining skill over a longer period, but you can also still, I suppose, learn that in a shorter period if you've got the time and budget to fit all that in.
So I know you've been quite successful in F1000, and that you have driven an F3 car. Has there ever been any hope or wishes to progress into a
Uh,
more difficult league?
yeah, I mean, the year we won, we came into F1000 in 2012 after I'd done, I think I had a year out. I didn't do anything in 2011. I don't remember doing anything in 2011. We'd come off the back of, I'd had like a really bad crash out in Germany racing in the supercarts. Came back from that in 2009. Did the championship through 2009-10. Got back into the European Series in 2010. And then we sort of started doing a little bit of like testing. Like I tested like Formula Renault. We tried to go down the Formula Renault route. We did quite a few tests with them, but then again, it was just budget really more than anything. We sort of had a good deal on the table, but even still to kind of raise that budget with like a big sponsor was going to be like really tough. We could have maybe afforded to go and do 1 or 2 rounds, but then like it's you sort of running a risk of then doing 2 rounds and not finding a sponsor and then being out of racing for another year. So yeah, we sort of when we went to F3 in 2014, we had quite a good like little bit of like media behind us, and obviously a big bit of promotion off the back of like winning the F1000. So the goal was originally to go and do British F3, but then I think at the time the British F3 folded, and then that's why we ended up jumping the F3 Cup. And then the next kind of option really was to either go into like the European F3 or obviously like the FIA F3, but then again, it's like massive budget jump compared to sort of even like the British F3. So we did have a sponsor at the time that was going to do the British F3 with us, but then that all sort of fell off the sort of cliff, and then we sort of went for the year in F3 just to kind of get a bit of like F3 experience more than anything. But then nothing really came off the back of that, hence why we sort of made the switch back to F1000, because it was at that point then I think I was maybe, I don't know, mid-20s. So it's like getting to that point where like you kind of missed the cut off for single seaters. I mean, there's always the option of like going down the route of like saloons, which we may look at. But again, when you've got a car like the F1000 car, it's hard to sort of think, oh, I'll go and race something else because it's going to be so much slower. We went testing in like a BMW 1160 the other day with like one of our drivers who was sort of doing like a development thing with, and like driving, like I was only a passenger on board just doing some like driver training with him, and I was sort of like sat there like it's so slow. It was like I think we were going around like Alton Park in like 2 minutes. I don't know, like 2 minutes 18 or something. And I was like, we go around this in like 1:30 something in an F1000 car. It's just like chalk and cheese.
So with the financial requirements and state of racing in England as it is, do you think is there anything that can be done to maybe help people not progress into it? Because I imagine there's a lot of people who slip through the cracks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of the guys who kind of, I mean, I think maybe George Russell's done quite well, and like, I think he's kind of got there off the back of like not a massive budget. Obviously, Lando, I think's got quite a good backing. So I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, when we were coming up through like karts and getting towards sort of thinking of switching to single seaters. Obviously, I think it's still going now. Obviously, like Racing Steps Foundation, things like that, which sort of, if you can raise so much money, they'll kind of help you along the way. Obviously, there's like the driver academies of obviously the bigger F1 teams and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe more. I mean, maybe some more options of like these. Like academy sort of things that, you know, like you can like go in and like if you can like progress through it, you can win drives, things like that. I mean, obviously anything like that's going to, you know, as long as they're looking at the drivers that are performing the best, so for whatever they're looking for within that category of what they're doing on that day, in terms of like the driving and the ability and the speed and everything that comes with it, like as a whole package, then, you know, there's options of things like that that can help people that can win drives maybe. Obviously there's a lot of like esport things going on. I've kind of just sort of dipped my toe into sort of doing a little bit on that, but even still I've like still sort of learning my way around it.
So I know you have a sponsor for F1000. So how does they come about? How do you attract them, and how do they work? You know?
I mean, again, I think a lot of the time with sponsors, it's either a lot of the time I think it's always like someone you know or someone you've got a link with. I don't think you don't often find that you'll like just approach a company and say, "Oh, will you sponsor me?" and they'll go, "Yeah, that's crack on and here's some money." So a lot of the time it is through, you know, someone that you've got a link with somewhere. So like our sponsor in F1000 Deeper Drivers, they came about through Andy, my teammate. So he's like a master away from the racing. He's a master saddlesman, and he actually does the saddles for one of the managers at Deeper Drivers. So that's sort of how it came about, and it was a case of we had like a bit of an introduction through the door. It was just a case of like selling ourselves, selling what we're doing, and obviously giving them value for money in terms of what we're doing in terms of sponsorship and, you know, advertising and promoting their brand and everything that goes with it. So in that case, I think, you know, we had a sort of foot through the door. But again, I think, I mean, there's again, it's like that's a little bit of a two-part thing as well, because like ours came about through that way. But then I suppose if you are someone who can build a good like social media following these days, again, that in itself sometimes attracts people in. You might get approached that way. So yeah, I suppose there's like sort of two routes these days. You either try and build like a really good brand behind you and build a good following that might draw in a sponsor, but then also at the same time, I think it usually comes from someone you know or a link you've got somewhere.
So I know you said just as well that you dip your toe into esports and things like that. Have you ever thought about changing into something else, like seriously? Is that part of the future for you?
What, in terms of racing series or any esports?
But just change it if you either want to change it to esports or change series or cars.
I mean, like I say, I've kind of like already dipped my toe into the esports stuff at the minute. I'm just doing like, I'm not really entered any championships. For me at the minute, it's just been like trying to find one that fits, like being able to do it as well, like with work and racing and everything, fitting the time in to be able to like put the time into like learn how to drive the cars quickly on there, because it's just like obviously you drive it probably different than what you would on the real track. So learning like that side of it. So I don't really want to kind of just like enter something and like be at the back. So I'm sort of like too competitive to be running at the back. I don't mind if I'm like middle pack or like, you know, potentially looking at a podium or something, but yeah, I don't want to be sort of like entering something that I'm not going to be like competitive in. So on that side, probably esports is probably, I mean, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, age thing, maybe I'm like kind of slightly missed the boat on learning that. But I'm kind of getting there with it. I think in terms of swapping series, I mean, we've talked about we have talked about like stuff like the 116 trophy, because that's quite popular. Again, I suppose like we only did it on a track day, so maybe with 40 cars around you on a racetrack, it'll probably be a slightly different scenario, because everyone's going to be lapping very quickly, very closely, because there's such a sort of a competitive grid. We have talked about, we did do a Fun Cup test a couple of years ago. I think it was just after we sort of all the pandemic stuff had just started settling down. We did a Fun Cup test, so we have talked about maybe switching and doing something in maybe like a bit of an endurance championship, and maybe sort of splitting the drives that way, so that rather than just like looking at something to budget as a single person, we can maybe budget and go into like something where 2 or 3 of us can sort of share the drive.
So, like, we're coming to the end of it now. Have you had any regrets in your career or regrets in starting it?
I mean, I think like I've achieved a lot in terms of what I've done in racing. I mean, yeah, maybe like the only real regrets is maybe not like pushing myself personally like hard enough. Maybe not so much like on the track. I think every time I get in a race car, I'm driving a race car, like I want to win. It's like I've got to win this race, like no matter what kind of thing. But I mean, mate, I suppose as you kind of get older, you kind of learn a little bit to maybe dial that back in certain situations. If you know you can't win a race for whatever reason, or you racing for a championship, you'll settle for a result maybe. But yeah, maybe probably the only regret really just not pushing myself personally. Maybe when I was a bit younger, when I maybe had the opportunity to maybe do a little bit more, pick up, like that sponsor, or probably just like a bit more like off track effort more than actually like on track effort. But I suppose, as a teenager and growing up, you sort of your mind wanders elsewhere, doesn't it? And you've got other things on your mind, or you get into like, I don't know, like gaming or other things sort of like take your eye off the ball. So yeah, probably maybe just more focused when I was like younger to sort of maybe aim more down the route of a career rather than just turning up at a racetrack and racing at a weekend. But I mean, it's a very sort of small window of people that go from, even a good driver can still like miss out. I've raced against like Colin Brown was in the series one a couple of years ago when he was racing with Chiron when they came in, and he's someone who's beat Lewis Hamilton at the World Karting Championships. Yeah, I'm racing against him in F1000, and he's sort of never got that big break to go racing anywhere. And he's struggled to get big sponsorship to even get into like a GT series or that side of things. So yeah, like I said earlier on, a lot do slip through the net. I probably maybe was one of them that slipped a little bit through the net, that maybe even if I couldn't have got to the heights of F1, could have still maybe got a better career maybe in another GT series somewhere. But it's one of those things. I'm kind of enjoying what we're doing at the minute. So the nice thing at the minute is as well, we're sort of like building our team up quite well. So even though I may have missed out on a career when I was younger in terms of maybe reaching the higher ranks of racing, at the same time we're sort of building something quite nice at the minute as well with the F1000. So we've gone from 2 cars, I think 2019, 2020, I think 2019 we sort of started it up. 2020 we ran 2 cars, 2021 3 cars, 2022 4 cars. So it's coming along nicely, and it's like we're getting some sort of like good drivers through the door, and we're sort of working on like development as well of like future drivers. So as a team it's working quite nicely actually in that respect. So every as one door closes, as they say, another one opens somewhere else. So yeah, keep going. As long as we're on a racetrack and enjoying racing, that's part of it.
So if you had to give some advice to some of these younger drivers, what would you tell them to try and make the most out of their careers?
I'd probably just say, put the effort in off the track, take opportunities that anyone offers you. Like today, you messaged and said, "Can you do this interview?" Yeah, let's crack on and do it. It's take the opportunities. I mean, again, it's a slightly different world than probably when I was a kid, because like social media, phones, digital side of things is a lot bigger now than it was when I was younger. So like that, even Facebook wasn't around, I don't think, until like I was sort of in my later teens maybe. So yeah, like I say, just take opportunities, put the effort in. If you do everything you can do off the track and on the track, then you're giving you the best opportunity. You're giving yourself that best chance to get where you want to be.